Hello and welcome to Timeless with Julie Hartman, or as we sometimes jokingly call it, Less Time with Hartman Julie. It is Tuesday, December 10th, 2024. I'm Julie Hartman, and it's great, as always, to be with you. 844-861-5537 is the call-in number, 844-861-5537. And as always, you can use the live chat. And thank you to those who used it yesterday, who alerted me to some technical difficulties that the live stream was cutting in and out. Ay, ay, ay. Oh, gosh, it is no more frustrating to anyone than I when the live stream cuts out. But rest assured that we always post a full version afterwards when this does occur. Now, I don't know about you, but I have been utterly fascinated by this Luigi Mangione case, mostly because I enjoy saying it in that bad Italian accent. Luigi Mangione. You know, when I was in Spanish class in high school, I had this very bizarre penchant for speaking Spanish in an Italian accent. I go, hola, ¿cómo estás? Muy bien, gracias. ¿Y usted? Muy bien. And I couldn't shake it. I couldn't do a Spanish accent. I could only do an Italian accent. Very bizarre, given that I have no Italians in my family. At that point, I had never been to Italy or listened to many Italians, but it was always a source of comedy in my Spanish classes. Anyway, this Luigi Mangione has totally captured my attention. He's this 26-year-old guy who, as we talked about yesterday, was arrested in Pennsylvania at a McDonald's for being the suspect in the assassination of Brian Thompson, the former CEO of United Healthcare, who was slain in broad daylight just before 7 a.m. in front of the Hyatt Hotel last Wednesday in Midtown Manhattan, where he was for the annual United Healthcare Investors Conference. So Luigi was taken in the handcuffs. I'm sorry, the whole show when we're talking about this, I'm gonna have to resist the urge to talk in my Italian accent. So Luigi was taken in the handcuffs in Altoona, Pennsylvania on Monday. A worker there, according to the Wall Street Journal, noticed something familiar about a lone customer on Monday. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to be professional. But this is just fascinating, and we're going to see in a few minutes a video of a Luigi freaking out in front of the jail cell. But a worker there, this is according to the Wall Street Journal, noticed something peculiar about a lone customer in the McDonald's. And this worker called the police, and that's when the police arrived. And again, according to the Wall Street Journal, Mangione was found towards the back of the McDonald's, sitting with a laptop. When a police officer asked if he had been to New York recently, he became quiet and began to shake. New York prosecutors have charged him with murder, according to court documents. Yeah, not a great sign when you start to quake in the presence of a police officer, when you fit the script for the suspect in this murder. And the Wall Street Journal goes into detail about the background of one Luigi Mangione and traced some of his public postings online. And specifically, they profile some of the reviews that he left for various books on book reads. The Wall Street Journal says, quote, Luigi appeared to be a prolific reader. He wrote at least 13 book reviews on Goodreads. Now let's pause for a minute. That is funny to me that we now consider 13 books to be prolific. The Wall Street Journal, no less, deems reading 13 books to mean that the individual is a prolific reader. Boy, that makes me feel better about myself. I've definitely read 13 books. I've read 13 books in the past 6 months. So wonder how the Wall Street Journal would characterize me. Anyway, he appeared to be a prolific reader. He wrote at least 13 book reviews on Goodreads, 4 of which include links to public Google Drive folders containing his handwritten thoughts and feedback. It's a lot of work to do. Here's one particularly intriguing review. Quote, in his review of The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, Mangione recalls how his mother would make him eat steak with his right hand, even though he was naturally left-hand dominant. By the way, you know, we used to do that in schools. In American public schools, look it up, in the 50s, 60s, and maybe 70s, I think the 70s is when we nixed it, we used to require that if a student was left-handed, that they would learn to write with their right hand. And I often compare that to the modern day transing of the kids. Whenever I make arguments, as I often do, against the absurd transing of the kids in our public schools, I say, wait a minute, if we go back in time, we kind of figured out that teaching people to write with their right hands when they were naturally left-handed was not the greatest thing to do. How is that any different from going up to a boy and saying, hey, you're a girl, or going up to a girl and saying, hey, you may be a boy? It is quite literally taking that individual's natural inclinations and trying to shift it towards something that you deem to be more appropriate. So anyway, put that one in your pipe and smoke it. But apparently Mangione's mama did this to him. Even though he was naturally left-hand dominant, Mangione recalls how his mother would make him eat steak with his right hand out of adherence to social norms. He used this as an example to indicate his disdain for simply accepting things as they were. Now, he also wrote a review of the Unabomber Manifesto called Industrial Society and Its Future. He gave the Unabomber Manifesto 4 stars on Goodreads, and here's what he wrote. It gives you a real look into his psyche. Quote, a take I found online about this book I think is interesting. Quote, he meaning the Unabomber, had the to recognize that peaceful protest has gotten us absolutely nowhere. And at the end of the day, he's probably right. When all other forms of communications fail, violence is necessary to survive. You may not like his methods, but to see things from his perspective, it's not terrorism, it's war and revolution. If we just take that paragraph right there, I, as a recent graduate of college, and as a member of Gen Z and someone who is very well aware of the types of left-wing arguments that have infiltrated and permeated our psyche and our education, that is a textbook example of reclassifying words. Remember, of course, during the pandemic or during Black Lives Matter, when people would say, silence is violence. I remember looking at that as the liberal I was. For not too long at that point. That was the thing that turned me around. But at the time I was a liberal. I remember thinking, this is so bleeping stupid. Silence is not violence. Silence is silence. Violence is violence. We go down a very dangerous path when we start to take words and totally twist their meaning. And now we have just seen an explosion of this. It is a classic progressive tool in their toolkit. I speak frequently on this show about the abhorrent proposal in the state of Illinois to amend the Abused and Neglected Child Reporting Act to say that an abused child is one whose parents deny them gender-affirming care. That is another example. You take the word abuse, which in no stratosphere has ever meant something approximating that definition that they are now proposing. And they're trying to twist that kind of language to make it fit so that their progressive ideas can come to the fore. We see this time and time and time again. Racism has been turned and skewed. We're now something like a microaggression, which definitionally in the name is micro, is now deemed to be racist. Sexist has been transformed. The word offended has been transformed. I don't need to go on. You see it every day. You get the point. But look here at this guy's review. Mangione is quoting another review that he is endorsing, and this person says that using violence is, quote, not terrorism, it's revolution. No, it's terrorism. You can't pass that off as something that it's not. But once we start to accept these things into our lexicon, then we really do start giving credence to these insane ideas. I remember during Black Lives Matter, which was my red pill moment. By the way, I don't know how anybody didn't become hugely red pilled during that summer. People, when the rioters and the looters were rioting and looting, people who I thought I respected were posting these obscene messages on social media saying, looting isn't stealing, looting is taking back what is theirs. No, it's not. Looting is stealing. You can't reconfigure that. And if we look at the October 7th massacre in Israel, look at the exact definition or explanation that they gave for what Hamas did that terrible day when they raped, beheaded, and killed 1,400 Israelis and took 251 hostages. What did people say? They said, oh, well, Hamas is just taking back what's theirs. This is the playbook in left-wing thought. And so this guy here has this very in vogue progressive way of totally twisting the act of violence and saying, oh, it's not violence, it's revolution. Going on, Mangione, in addition to these exposed reviews that he wrote praising violence and giving 4 stars to the Unabomber manifesto, he also apparently on his X account had an X-ray image of a person's back after, reading from the Wall Street Journal, what appears to be a spinal fusion surgery. Now, his Goodreads profile, also according to the Wall Street Journal, indicates that he had been reading books about back pain. And according to sources that were close to Mangione, he suffered from chronic back pain for much of his life. And that pain, quote, affected all parts of his life, including his ability to have a romantic life or enjoy sports such as surfing. This is according to Josiah Ryan, who is a, quote, spokesperson for the founder of a Hawaii co-housing complex where Mangione lived in 2022. Ryan says that this back pain of Mangione's was, quote, always sort of a shadow with him. Okay, I guess that's more interesting information to have of him. Also, he posted on his X account not only about back pain, but about his anxiety and mental health. He shared a quote by an Indian philosopher that said, quote, "It is no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." So here's what we know. This guy encountered troubles. He had back pain. We know that he seemed to have a fascination with violence and seemed to condone people who committed violence in the name of what he would deem to be revolution. That he, according to this quote, seemed to think that we were living in a profoundly sick society. And according to the New York Police Department, which seized the pistol that was found in his possession when he was arrested at the McDonald's, in addition to the fake IDs, they found this manifesto that he wrote about healthcare. And this NYPD chief of detectives, Joseph Kenney, said, quote, "It does seem that Mangione has some ill will towards corporate America." So we can kind of see the picture here. Now, as I indicated yesterday, Mangione attended the University of Pennsylvania. He majored there in computer science, and he also earned a master's degree. So he was no dummy. And I have many friends who went to UPenn, and I have been relentlessly asking them to give any kind of information about Luigi Mangione. It's funny, women tend to be very interested in true crime, which perhaps indicates a part of my fascination. Men tend to be more the ones who commit the crime, but women are interested in true crime. And so far, none of my friends knew him or had even seen him on campus, though he was in a popular fraternity. There were photos on his Instagram account of him and his Phi Kappa Psi fraternity brothers, often on a couch outside of their home. Let's put up a picture of Luigi's mugshot. This is picture 1 of Luigi, okay? And there's another disturbing video that was taken actually literally like 25 minutes ago of an outburst that he had while being led to his hearing. Let's roll it, video 6.
Down.
Luigi. Oh my God! That's completely out of touch. And an insult to the intelligence of the American people and the lived experience.
Sean, could you make out anything he was saying there?
Said something like it's a insult to the American people, their lived experience.
Another progressive term, lived experience. Yeah, Okay. Now, his family actually runs a healthcare company. Did you know that? According to the Wall Street Journal, in Maryland, his family founded Loren Healthcare, a senior healthcare company with services that include nursing and assisted living. It was founded in 1977. They also own a spa and a country club. So he came from a well-off family. And also, he was the valedictorian of his graduating class. And there's a video of a speech that he delivered, and he seems like a perfectly normal guy. Video 2.
The class of 2016 is truly defined by its inventive, pioneering mentality that accompanies a strong commitment to Gilman tradition. Throughout its time here at Gilman, the class of 2016 has been coming up with new ideas and challenging the world around it. Gilman maintains its classic core values by cultivating mind, body, and spirit in its students, but also champions an environment of acceptance and diversity. The people in our lives, especially our parents and teachers, had such huge roles as well. The parents here today, first off, sending us to Gilman was far from a small financial investment. I'd like to personally thank each of you for sending your sons here, as I can't imagine the class of 2016 without any one of these men on stage. Further, thank you for all the time and love you have put into our lives. You've instilled values in us, fed and clothed us, and simply been there for us every step of the way. Just like we've done these past few years, we'll be exploring the unknown, whether that be attending colleges across the country, traveling the world during gap years, or fulfilling military service in foreign countries. As we embrace the new, however, we won't forget the old. Our friendships, values, and memories from Gilman will always stay with us.
Seems like a gracious guy. Of course, he referenced diversity and some other left-wing buzzwords in there, but he seems completely normal to me. In the last few months, concern, according to the Wall Street Journal, for Mangione. See, I need the Italian accent to say it. Mangione appeared among his friends, according to social media posts. Hey, man, I need you to call me. I don't know if you're okay or just in a super isolated place, but I haven't heard from you in months, a man wrote on X to him in July, reminding Mangione, quote, you made commitments to me for my wedding. If you can't honor them, I need to know so that I can plan accordingly. On October 30th, another post said, quote, hey, are you okay? Nobody has heard from you in months, and apparently your family is looking for you. Very sad. What's even more sad is the fact that there are people online who are praising this sicko. Really? I guess I shouldn't be surprised after what we've seen during BLM, during and after the October 7th massacre in Israel, people praising violence. It's a sick society that we live in, to reference an earlier quote of Mangione, that people are praising someone for killing a man. Rich Lowry in the National Review highlighted a column that was published in New York Magazine this week by Sarah Jones. The title of it is, quote, the shooting that was inevitable. Our political system is breaking down. Now it has killed. Rich Lowry says that the author, Sarah Jones, advances the Frederick Engels, that was Karl Marx's co-author of the Communist Manifesto, advances the Frederick Engels concept of social murder. When a society mistreats its proletariat, according to Engels, its deed is murder, just as surely as the deed of a single individual. Okay, great. Jones says, again reading from Rich Lowry, that this logic applies to health insurance companies too. Sure, United Healthcare, she says, quote, does not pull a trigger and shoot its victims in the street, but it's killing people nonetheless. So we can see the stretching of these words and the stretching of these explanations that are given to an instance like this. And what do you expect? What do you expect when for so long you are doing this very thing? When you're saying things like silence is violence, or real violence isn't actually violence if it's done in the name of some greater cause. Of course you're going to produce someone like this. And these universities and these thought leaders need to understand the consequences of what they're promulgating. I'm sure they're happy with the consequences of what they're promulgating, the progressive thought leaders who espouse these kinds of ideas. But we're going to see even more of this because there's been a whole generation that has been raised to think of these terms in flexible and amendable ways instead of clear-cut values that violence is never okay. Speaking of something that is never okay, let's see if this transition is better than yesterday. Yesterday was a 1 out of 10. I'm gunning for 4 out of 10. No, wait, Sean, he's shaking his head. It's about to be good. Speaking of something that is never okay, it is never okay to not provide for your family great Christmas gifts. Isn't that good? Well, you can provide your family with great Christmas gifts if you go to My Pillow, oh God, and see their offerings. Maybe it'd be better if I did it in an Italian accent. There's something for everyone on your Christmas list with My Pillow, from bathrobes, duvets, quilts, down comforters, and so much more. They're excited right now to announce their Christmas extravaganza. You can get this season's flannel sheets for as low as $59.98, and they won't last long, so get them while you can. You can get their famous My Slippers, and these haven't been on sale for a long time. They are my favorite My Pillow product. I use them every day. They're regularly priced at $119.98, but for a limited time, you can get them for $59.98. You can get their 6-piece towel sets, which are back in stock, again, with extremely limited quantities, for only $29.98, flannel sheets for as low as $59.98, and they're extending their 60-day money-back guarantee until March 1st, 2025. All orders over $75 receive free shipping, so don't wait. Go to mypillow.com and call 1-800-566-6745. Again, you can get the slippers, the bathrobes, duvets, quilts, down comforters. There's something for everyone on your Christmas list. Go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Hartman, or call 1-800-566-6745 and use the promo code Hartman. Now, before we get into our 5th installation of some stories from the Gospels that we are profiling during this Christmas month of December, let's look at oy vey, a Christmas installation that took place at the Vatican, which is incurring some criticism, I think, deservedly. Picture 3. The Vatican put up an installation of the night that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. We can see there Pope Francis wheeling over to observe it. And if you look closer there, Jesus is depicted as a Palestinian in a keffiyeh. Now, there's just one small problem with that. Jesus was a Jew. That is the most established, obvious fact for anyone, that Jesus was a Jew. Look no further than the day of his crucifixion, when he was nailed to the cross. What did Pontius Pilate put above him? Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. It's just unbelievable. And Pope Francis is wheeling over there looking at that display. And it is just a complete subversion of history. Jesus was born in Palestine, the area that is now Palestine. He was born in that area, but that doesn't mean that he was a Palestinian. Again, he is the most famous Jew on earth. So it's just, let's just say it's funny so that we don't think it's something else. Let's just laugh at it. But few people nowadays, with our lack of biblical literacy, may not even know that that is a subversion of reality. Speaking of biblical literacy, let's dive in here. This is my favorite part of the shows for the month of December, looking at various stories from the Gospels and figuring out what we can learn from them, at the very least from a civilizational perspective, and hopefully also from a faith or seeking inspiration perspective. Today we're going to talk about parables. Parables are a big part of the Gospels, and Jesus would tend to instruct people using these stories or parables. And there are several of them. It's difficult to narrow them down, but I'm just going to focus on 2 today. And the first one is the parable of the sower, or I always struggle with this one. The sower or the sower? Let's go with sower. I think it's sower. I'm staring at Sean, and he's literally just staring back at me. Thank you for your help. I really, really appreciate your coming to my aid here. Very kind of you. Should we play that thing that we always play? Have you guys seen that on YouTube when you need to pronounce something and there's a guy and he has some kind of accent and he goes, "Hello and welcome to the Pronounce channel. Everybody's looking for the way to pronounce," and then they spell it Sower. And then it's like 45 seconds into the video where they actually tell you how to pronounce it. Let's go with Sower. So it's a very simple thing, but I think it has a profound message that extends beyond faith, but of course is especially relevant to faith. Let's look at the picture associated with this from George Pence from 1537. This is picture 5. And this is in the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus is talking about the foundation that one needs for their faith. And he likens it to throwing seeds and seeing how they will grow. And he says, when anyone hears the word of the kingdom and doesn't understand it, the wicked one comes and snatches away what is sown in his heart. This is he who received the seeds by the wayside. He who received the seed on stony places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy, yet he has no root in himself and it endures only for a while. I think a lot of people with faith or who have struggled with faith can relate to this, that you kind of have these almost like chartable periods where you're very high in your faith or you're confident and then you kind of slump down. And then you gain it again and then you kind of slump down. And essentially what I think he's saying here is that we need vigorous spiritual maintenance in order to have faith. In every possible realm of life, you need maintenance in order to continue what it is that you're endeavoring to uphold. But especially with faith, because if you're not reading the Bible or practicing it on a consistent basis, it's going to be just like this, where someone throws seeds, it hits a stone, and it's maybe, there for a few days, but there are no roots, there's no foundation, it's just going to wither away. But he goes on and he says, now those who receive the seed among thorns is he who hears the word, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becomes unfruitful. We can understand that if you have a malignance in your heart, or if you have ambitions that are beyond doing good, it's like throwing seeds onto thorns. Nothing's going to happen with it. But he who receives seed on good ground is he who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and produces some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. So that's a short one. Just that you need the eyes to see, the ears to listen, the heart open to receive the wisdom that he is providing. And another parable that I think is even better than this one, although that one is a, I think, great insight into the kind of mindset that you need to be in to have good faith. This is the parable of the Good Samaritan, and this comes from the Gospel of Luke. And with these parables, they sound kind of obvious to us. This one is about helping your neighbor. And sometimes I think that we in the modern day fail to understand just how revolutionary an idea like this was. Dennis Prager, my dear, dear co-host, colleague, and friend, had this PragerU video where he said that if God doesn't exist, then murder isn't wrong. And people came at him online saying that that was the most asinine statement that they have ever heard. But what he was indicating is something that our modern sensibilities do not conceptualize. And it's that before the 10 Commandments, murder wasn't exactly wrong. In fact, in many ancient societies, think about it, if someone killed your brother or someone, God forbid, raped your mother or your sister, it would actually be seen as an obligation to murder that person. An eye for an eye. Why would you let someone get away with hurting a family member or disrespecting a family member? It was totally normal and, again, seen in some cases as obligatory. with the advent of the Ten Commandments and the moral inventions of the Torah, it is when we came to adopt these now seemingly a-religious and universal concepts, such as the fact that murder is wrong. Even if someone murders your family member, you never murder another person. And that's the same with loving your neighbor as yourself. We, luxuriating in the Judeo-Christian foundation of the United States of America, think that something like that is obvious. But back in the day, and by the way, even today in most societies, you're a chump for loving your neighbor. You know the sectarian conflicts in the Muslim world? If a Sunni person helps a Shia person in most parts of the Muslim world, that is seen as sacrilegious. It is seen as a betrayal. If a Hutu helps a Tutsi, if a Taiwanese helps a Chinese, etc., that is beyond the realm of possibility. You would never do such a thing. And really, with the coming of the Judeo-Christian tradition is when those ideas were discarded. That it doesn't matter what kind of tribal or religious or ethnic or affiliation you have, everyone has human dignity. And because they are a human being and they are created in the image and likeness of God, you have an obligation to love them and treat them well as you would treat yourself. And so here in this parable of the Good Samaritan, and by the way, interesting that it's called the Good Samaritan, because as we know from last week when I talked about the story of the Samaritan woman at the well, the Jews and the Samaritans, those from Samaria, were not exactly friends. There was a lot of ethnic strife and division among the people of the kingdom of Israel at the time. So here in the Gospel of Luke, it says, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. He said, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus said, "What is written in the law?" And this man answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and all your mind." By the way, when I read that, do you remember, Sean would not get this reference. This is a total female reference. During Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's wedding, there was a very boisterous pastor who the Queen and other of the stiff upper lip royals in the audience thought was too much. You can look it up. Look up Camilla and Kate laughing at the pastor at William and Harry and Meghan's wedding. And he said this. He said, love the Lord God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength and all your mind. And he was yelling it. And there's a video of Camilla and Kate hysterically laughing. If we can pull that, it will be golden. Anyway, so this Jesus says that, and he says, love your neighbor as yourself. The guy said that in response to Jesus's question. And Jesus said, you have answered this correctly. Do this and you will live. But then this man rejoins and he says, and who is my neighbor? And this is where Jesus says a parable. He says, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, where he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road. When he saw the man, he passed by him. So too a Levite, and you notice these are different ethnicities, when he came to the place and saw him, passed him. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him, bandaged his wounds, poured oil and wine. He put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out I don't even know what this is, denarii. Oh, Roman silver coins, the more you know. And gave it to an innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense. And then Jesus said, which of these three do you think was the neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? And the expert said, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. Have mercy on people who are different from you. And again, we think that's an obvious, dare I even say, throwaway story. But this was so revolutionary at the time because these different ethnicities, these different factions hated each other, just as there is still sectarian and tribal conflict all around the world. And so it's nothing to sneeze at, these moral inventions that all of us take for granted, but have contributed to such prosperity that all of us are the beneficiaries of. I think it's important for us to have some kind of appreciation for them. And I'll even add on to this, but before I do, I want to show you my dear friend, and I would call the art consultant for Timeless, Robert Florzak, did a fantastic painting of this parable of the Good Samaritan, picture 4. He did this in 1989, and he emails me these pictures. I text him in the morning and I tell him what stories we're doing for the Gospels on Timeless, and he's gracious enough to send his recommendations for art. And I was scrolling through and I looked at this and I thought, wow, that's a really good one. I love the emotion in the face of the Good Samaritan. I love the surrounding wood carving. It looks so beautiful. And I said to myself, this is the best painting out of all of them. And then I looked at who painted it, and I didn't even realize that it was our dear Robert. So kudos to you, Robert, for making such a fantastic image of this. But I'll say another thing about this story. I want to create a book, sort of like an adult picture book, about people's encounters with God. Whenever I meet a Christian, it's one of my favorite things to do, and I encourage you to do it if you haven't, is to ask them, have you ever had a direct encounter or a vision of God? And oftentimes people will say yes, especially the most devout Christians. And I was, as many of you know, in Rome this summer, and I encountered a priest who had the ability to read people's souls. And I know that sounds crazy. And trust me, when I heard it at the time, I thought it was crazy. People had gone to a meeting with this priest and they said that he read their soul. And I thought, okay, this is hocus pocus stuff. What are you talking about? I believed that the people believed it and that they genuinely felt that they had experienced it, but I was skeptical, to put it mildly. And then I went there with Father Vinay. He's this funny, lovely Indian guy whose diocese are in Bombay. Boy, that camera is very close to me. I was just looking up at myself. Maybe you don't need to be so close to me. Anyway, I was talking with Father Vinay, and he completely read my soul. He knew nothing about me. He sat across from me, and he looked inside of me. He talked very specifically about members of my family, friends who he would have no way of knowing existed. He talked about personal things that I was struggling with that were, again, very, very specific. I was blown away by this man's ability. And one time I asked him, why do you think you have this supernatural ability? And he said, I don't know, in his Indian accent. And I said, come on, haven't you ever asked God this question? And he said, yeah, I actually have. And he said, God said to him, the reason I have given you this gift is because you care for the poor, the sick, and the disabled, who are my best friends. And I want to put that story on pause for a moment and tell you another one, because these things, the more that I talk with people who are in this world and ask them about any encounters or visions that they've had with Jesus, they say things that affirm another story or an encounter, and I learned something. I met this other girl who was on another program in Rome, and she and I got talking, and she is living and working in upstate New York, and she volunteers as a caretaker for a 33-year-old autistic boy named Jay. And I said to her, oh, wow, I have a 33-year-old autistic sister named Gina. And so we started talking about, the disabled, and she told me that she went on a missionary trip in Mexico for disabled children. And this is when I asked her, the origin of the conversation was, had she ever had an encounter with Jesus? And it kind of morphed into this. And she told me this incredibly moving story. She said that she went to Mexico on this missionary trip, and there was a facility for disabled orphans. And on the bottom floor, there were people with sort of lower level, if you will, disabilities like Down syndrome. And then on the top level, there were more severe disabilities. And she said that they were so impoverished and so strapped for resources that the people on the bottom floor of this place. We're caring for the people on the top floor. And so she said that she came to the top floor and she was volunteering with various patients. And she said that there was a patient sort of at the end who was seizing and who was having, mucus come out of him. Sorry for the TMI, but it is important to the story. And she said no one would go near him and care for him because it was just frankly so disgusting. And she said, I gathered the courage and the grace to go up to him. And she said, I got maybe about 3 feet away from him. And she said, the stench of his body odor was so overwhelming. She said, I just turned out and ran immediately out of the room. And she said something I thought was so decent of her. She said, it was in that moment I encountered my own poverty. I thought, wow, what a lovely way to say such a thing. That in that moment I encountered my own poverty. And she said, I walked back over. I gathered even more courage to go back over to that man. She said, I walked over and somehow all of the mucus had been cleaned up. The guy was completely serene. And she said to me, Julie, I swear to God, staring right back at me as I looked at that man was Jesus Christ. And I was blown away by that. And I connected what Father Vinay said to me about his gift when he asked God, and God said to him, it's because you care for the poor, the sick, and the disabled who are my best friends. I connected that with what this woman said about her experience looking into this incredibly crippled, debilitated individual and seeing the face of God staring back. I connected it with my own experience. Oftentimes when I'm with my sister who's very disabled, I feel like I am looking at the face of God. My dad actually always says that he looks into my sister's face and he feels that he sees the face of God, because I learned similar things with Gina as I learn with God. I learn patience. I learn principle and obligation. I learn about unconditional love, about the significance of challenges, that you may not always understand why something is happening or why this individual is doing this thing, but the challenge as a way of strengthening and ennobling you. I learned the same things with her that I learned through a belief in God. And so that's just to say, this parable that we're looking at now of the Good Samaritan, when Jesus is so intent on treating your neighbor as yourself, loving the downtrodden, I think there's a piece of that indicates that there's a special part of him that lives in the downtrodden. And all of those stories confirm that to me. Sean wants to cut in, yes?
Matthew 25, 40 through 45. And the king shall answer and say unto them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me.
Took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was just about to say. I didn't know. Yes, I had this here. I had no idea that was in the Gospels. And I was actually last night I was at dinner with someone and I was talking about this with them, and they said, well, he says that he says exactly that. And I sort of came to that conclusion on my own through my own experience. But I that is an amazing thing. And it makes sense. It makes sense that accessing him wouldn't be so easy, that it would require something of you to demonstrate something of yourself. But I'm telling you, I look at many of these individuals with a very strong belief that, as this gospel that you quoted indicated, that he lives in the downtrodden. And so I think that parable very much hits that home. And I hope that you enjoyed this. And we will certainly continue to talk about the Gospels. We have a few more episodes as we'll be profiling stories. And of course, we will continue to discuss this Luigi Mangione character. As an aside, I saw something on Twitter, and apparently, and this is speculative, this is not confirmed, there was some YouTube account that was posted under his name. And there's a scheduled video for December 11th. And the YouTube account, the video says, it's titled The Truth, and the description of the video says, if you're seeing this, I've already been arrested. So if this is actually him and this X post is verified and he actually created this video, we'll be seeing more perhaps of his thought process in the coming days. Yes, Sean, you wanted to cut in.
We have the Kate and Camilla video that you wanted.
Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, so this is when the pastor is saying that part that I just read to you, and they are trying to withhold their laughter.
Your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. This is the first and great commandment. Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. This is the first and great commandment. Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. This is the first and great commandment.
And Camilla has her fascinator such that nobody can actually see her face. I love videos like that. It's so funny. There's another one. I doubt we'll have time to pull it today, but Prince Charles and Camilla are in Canada, and some indigenous tribe is doing a dance in a traditional sound song in front of them, and they are cracking up. They're in the front row and they're supposed to, be very dignified and smile, and they just can't hold it in. Well, thanks for being here. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. In the meantime, you can email me at julie@julie-hartman.com. Take care. I'll see you.